One of the things you likely can't help but notice very early on as you play Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is the amount of stuff that's just kind of floating around in the air. Objects that refuse to obey gravity, lanterns that don't fall, broken bridges that are still suspended, rubble and rocks and uprooted puzzle pieces of earth all quietly swaying in the breeze. It's one small detail in a world that feels like an explosion of imagination. But across each of 33's wondrous areas, this unnatural pausing of impending destruction is a common denominator. It's a subtle way to communicate that something about this world is not allowed to resolve. This place is continually mid-tragedy, and it's a creative touch I couldn't help but also notice in a game called Neva as well. Trees don't wilt and wither when they fall here, they just hang in the air like a painting. Herons remain captured mid-flight, boars are posed mid-roar. The ground doesn't erupt and fall back to earth, it halts and hushes in place. Things don't die here. They aren't allowed to. Now I have to be careful here because I want to structure this video thusly. The purpose of the prologue you're currently watching is to set the scene a bit and tease what excites me most about Clair Obscur, and celebrating me for successfully using the word thusly in an essay. Part 1 of the video will be extremely soft spoilers. I'll cover exclusively early game stuff or just routine things about this game that I find to be special. We'll talk about the art direction, the battle system, the writing, and the little details that will really become relevant to my big point later on. But if you haven't played yet or haven't finished the game yet, this section is completely safe to watch and in many ways, I hope, encourages you to play. When we get to part 2, oh boy, it is gonna be group therapy time for those of us who have finished the game. It'll have more major spoilers than I have pops in my knee when I try to do anything athletic, but I'll make sure that it's clearly indicated when we get to that point. All that to say, the more I played this game, the more I realized it had me hopelessly spellbound. There are so many heart-wrenching details, there is so much said in the subtext, so much polish, and so much humanity in its characters and its dialogue. And what I find to be especially remarkable about this game is that, in some ways, it chooses to throw all of these wonderful things away to make its final point, and ultimately, expose you. And I realize that may not make much sense right now, but hopefully by the end of this, it will. This one has been so much fun to write about, and if I'm being honest, I'm excited to just glaze some of the things I really like about it. Don't get me wrong, I do have what I suppose you'd call a thesis for this video, and I promise it'll be more profound than... Wait, that's not what it's supposed to say. Hang on, what the... Oh, it's the root word. Okay, I see. Hang on. There will be some good old-fashioned DTG video essaying in this one. You might shed a tear, you might crack a beer, but in the spirit of honesty, I do want to do something I rarely get to do in this channel, and that's just gush over a game that I find to be particularly marvelous. So with all that said, pop some popcorn, put this thing full screen, get comfortable, and while you do that, I'll quickly tell you about today's sponsor, then we'll dive right into this. When you think about video games, one of the most rewarding parts for you might be learning new mechanics and the delicious satisfaction of mastering them. And what I think makes today's sponsor, Boot.Dev, so continually effective is that it harnesses this sensation to teach you a skill that you can build a career around. If you've ever been interested in coding, you'll find that Boot.Dev is a spectacular place to learn. Python, Go, JavaScript, TypeScript, SQL, C. In most places, you learn these in a classroom, but here, you can learn them in the comfort of your own home, the same way you might learn a mechanic in a video game. Lessons are built like missions in a game. You'll earn XP, levels, achievements, and complete quests to keep your learning from ever feeling like a lesson and instead more like an engaging journey. And the beauty of it is, you're never alone. If you find yourself stuck or simply want to see how the instructor wrote the code, there are solutions available for every challenge on the site. There is also a dedicated Discord server with fellow students and instructors to help you if you ever get stuck. The good people at Boot don't want to sell you some get-rich scheme or a few over-the-counter coding lessons. They want to invite you to a community of like-minded people all working together to build their careers. A career that not only paid a median salary of $100,000 in the US in 2024, but could also mean that you get to work from home. This could be a wonderful opportunity for you. Why not go take a peek at their content? all of it is free to read and watch in guest mode. And if you're logged in and decide that this is for you, go to Boot.Dev and use my code DarylTalksGames to get 25% off your entire first year if you choose the annual plan. Thanks again to Boot.Dev for the sponsor. Let's get back to the show. In the opening minutes of Expedition 33, you're met with shots of Lumiere, a town that, again, is suspended, not allowed to fully resolve. There is wreckage that will not land, buildings that will not fall. Even this world's Eiffel Tower itself is half decomposed, like a candle that is melting under the heat of the world's tiniest flame. The town itself, its architecture, its people, and their outfits are all based on La Belle Epoque, a time between roughly 1870 and 1920 that is often regarded as Europe's golden age, and at its heart was Paris, France. It was a time of bustling construction, technological innovation, advancements in literature, music, theater, and art. Electricity was becoming more common. This was the same era the Eiffel Tower was built. Art Nouveau was gaining prominence, a style of painting and design that used long, flowy, organic lines to embellish its subject. According to Britannica, it was a deliberate attempt to create a new style, free of the imitative historicism that dominated much of 19th century art and design. The technique dealt less in symmetry and more in unconcerned, natural lines. And you can see this not just in Lumiere's design, but across the entire continent. In Lumiere, you get these strange sweeping sculptures across rooftops. This lighthouse is structurally unsound and warped to one side. We've already mentioned this Eiffel Tower, but across the board, the beauty of symmetry is often completely discarded in favor of a free-flowing aesthetic. But you also see the influences of Art Deco, another movement from later in La Belle Epoque that leaned into the straight lines and hard edges of industrialism. This art movement reveled in geometric balance, and you find this in Lumiere as well. The perfectly symmetrical archways, the angular gold trim of the clothing, the speckled gold lines of the windmills. And a large part of this town's aesthetic is based around the clashing of these two styles. You get this precisely crafted pavilion overrun with the aloof waves of vines and petals. Your eyes wander to this winding sculpture unraveling up perfectly calculated railings and windows. Resounding, mathematically correct spires in the harbor are tilted to be just slightly less perfect. This contrast is echoed all throughout the rest of the world as well, in ways we'll talk about more later, even in enemy design. This was in fact a stylistic choice, as lead programmer Tom Guillermo points out in this interview with Unreal Engine. But he also says they're not the first studio to use the Art Deco and Nouveau styles. You see it in Dishonored, you see it in BioShock, you might even recognize it from something else you've played. And you'll find that this isn't the only method of opposing styles that this game uses. The title itself, Clair Obscur, may refer to the old Renaissance art style of chiaroscuro, where artists would use the glaring contrast between a dark background and an illuminated foreground to add a dramatic, uncanny depth and volume to the subject. This shot of the paintress, for example, uses this style to give her this otherworldly aura. You can't quite make out the details of her appearance because of the shadows, but the light gives what you can see just enough detail for your mind to fearfully fill in the blanks. The ambiguity and mystery give your mind fuel to run wild in the same way that looking up at the moon might. It's almost like its distance and obscure detail contrasted with its size and the harsh light of the sun makes it feel both infinitely far away and mysteriously at your fingertips all at once. And I know that is a lot of things said simply about the art direction of this game, but it's important that we start there because I think it's in that Clair Obscur truly tells its story. It uses that contrast between styles and colors to subtly direct our attention to a larger conflict at hand. A conflict between indulgent imagination and cold, exacting realism. I'll loop back to this on and off moving forward, so just keep that in mind. The people of Lumiere are all at the mercy of the paintress, a strange colossus in the distance that will, on this day every year, paint a new number and then return to her sorrowful retreat at the base of the monolith. On this day, known as the Gommage, those of the newly painted age will then cease to exist, leaving loved ones behind in their absence. No one knows why she does this, why she seems so sad, what exactly she is, or how this happens, but the number itself communicates the most important piece of information. So to try and end this imminent doom, the people of Lumiere have begun expeditions. Annually, brave souls will set out to try and kill the paintress so that she stops painting death for the people of Lumiere. Expedition 33 is where our journey starts, with Gustav, an engineer, Maël, an orphan under his care, and several others setting out to solve this mystery and end this suffering. What you'll discover upon arriving at the continent is a land that is every bit as treacherous as it is wondrous. Around one corner, you'll find mysteriously undecomposed corpses of previous expeditioners. Around another, you'll stumble upon a gaping expanse of ocean life and foliage, impossibly swimming above your head. How on earth can you breathe here? Is this underwater? Who knows, but man, just look at it. Lush crimson red forests, ethereal caves with haunting neon lanterns, coliseums with gargantuan dancing tapestry. Everything on the continent feels like an overflow of ideas that has been lying dormant for years, and that may not be entirely inaccurate. The creative director and founder of Sandfall Interactive sat at Ubisoft for years working on a handful of projects, including a mobile game, before quote-unquote getting bored and leaving to bet on himself. He says that pitching a project like Expedition 33 from his position would have taken 25 years of navigating red tape and working his way up before a AAA studio would greenlight it. At Ubisoft, his project would likely never have happened. So in many ways, this game, a project developed by around 30 passionate people, feels like a cathartic creative deluge where every idea that might have been told no over and over has finally come bubbling to the surface in a spectacular fashion. The work of people finally getting a chance to work with no boundaries, creatives allowed to color outside the lines. Obviously, you see this in the art direction, the landscape, the set pieces, but you also see it in the writing. These people act like people. Their interactions aren't robotic. They cut each other off like real humans do.
But I'm not afraid to fight. It's just Maël.
Maël swore the same oath.
There are pauses where they take a moment to process the impact of what the other has just said.
Wanting to escape a life you don't want.
Escape. Yeah. That's what I wanted.
They often struggle to come up with the right words.
When it's hard to talk about things, the stars will understand.
Compare these interactions with a scene like this.
Finally! Looks like the time has come to test out the alpha signal meter.
Yes, and if it functions as intended, things should be a lot easier. All right, let me take you to Matrix 11.
And I give this example with love. I actually really enjoyed Stellar Blade, but it, like so many others, isn't immune to that unnatural robotic video game dialogue timing that we've all come to accept. Clair Obscur just might be. And it's not just the delivery and voice acting, it's the writing itself, the motivations, the actions. A fantastic and not super spoilery example is the scene where Maël has just awoken from a nightmare that might contain information critical to the expedition. Gustav and Ciel want to comfort her, but Lune pushes almost to an uncomfortable degree.
What else? You said there was a woman.
Lune, maybe later.
I know this is hard, but I need you to focus, okay? While the details are fresh.
Luna, ask her tomorrow.
And maybe you take her side here. They are trying to save lives right now. Perhaps Maël's comfort can wait. This interaction alone is interesting because it's debatable what the right way to handle this situation is. But what gives this scene so much gravity is when you consider it in retrospect. Much later in the game, you'll find a journal left behind that tells the fate of Lune's mother.
She seemed almost peaceful. She said not to worry. Her daughter Lune will finish their work.
And Lune's reaction to this is not as inspired as you might think. She's not proud to carry on her mother's work. She's frustrated that she was always seen,
Not as a daughter, but as a backup plan for their legacy.
knowing that Lune harbors resentment toward her parents for never showing her warmth and instead treating her always as simply a means of ending the paintress, completely recontextualizes this scene because you realize in this moment, Lune is treating Maël exactly how she was treated growing up, as a tool, not a person. And when the others contend her for pushing, you almost see the exact moment she realizes who she's acting like. The irony of it is that she's projecting exactly what broke her onto someone else. It's a very we all become our parents moment, a very we expect from others what was expected of us moment. And this is just one drop in an ocean of interactions like this, where a character's words in one breath contradict their actions in another.
We're all hypocrites, doing the same thing to each other.
These self-belying moments are another subtle nod to that ever-present contrast between the flowery longing of fantasy and the sharp angled truth of reality. Comfort is what we crave, but action is what we need. This contrast even weaves itself ever so sneakily into the battle system. The game over screen is accented with the straight lines and symmetry of the Art Deco style, again, quietly building that association between reality and your failure. When you win, the whimsical journey continues and the flowing impact of your attack slows down and is accentuated with a dramatic pan out. And I simply cannot move on without taking a minute to talk about what makes this battle system so crunchy and delicious. It begins with the camera. Back in 2022, I made this video about Pokemon and how what's missing from modern day titles is not necessarily just creative animations for each mon, but also, critically, the camera work. So much of every battle takes place with this static over-the-shoulder angle. It is, of course, a callback to the classic Game Boy and DS titles, but it's also what I think keeps it feeling so antiquated. I said back then that if Game Freak would simply get a little more creative and use the camera more dynamically like you see in Pokemon Colosseum, or in Grandia, or in Persona, that alone would breathe life into an activity that you spend half the game doing. Expedition 33 takes this to heart and never misses an opportunity to make even something as simple as navigating a menu feel delicious. Most enemy attacks are accented with a snap zoom to sell the impact. Every one of your attacks boasts some unique camera trick. Maybe it bobs and weaves with CL's slashes. Maybe it pans around Gustav as he charges up for a lightning attack before zooming out wide to reveal the enemy getting hit. Each menu option shifts the camera to reflect the ever-changing offensive options your expedition is deliberating. Every turn is stitched together beautifully in a seamless flurry of pans and cuts. Clair Obscur, like Persona, refuses to let these battles ever feel like two opposing forces just standing and facing one another taking turns. You feel the intensity of every encounter without it ever feeling distracting. After all, on each of your attacks, all you have to do is time 2 or 3 button inputs like you see in Shadow Hearts or Legend of Dragoon. When an enemy attacks, you'll have to respond with a dodge or a parry or a jump. But when an attack might go to any of the 3 characters, the camera is calm and allows you to see where it's going. And again, the battle system squeezes so much feedback everywhere, especially when you parry. And I realize the dodging and parrying system is divisive for many people. You know, keep your FromSoft out of my Squaresoft. But I do appreciate how forgiving the jump and dodge windows are, and with certain builds, only doing that is perfectly viable. Plus, again, not the first game to have a battle system like this. And I want to talk about that for a minute, because Expedition 33's development team is not shy about giving credit to all of the games that came before it. Sandfall is very open about this. On multiple occasions, they've mentioned the influences in interviews. On their website right now, literally under each staff member, they have listed name, job title, and favorite games. Many of which you can clearly draw comparisons from. Many we have already acknowledged here. Even the platforming sections, which were apparently influenced by Bennett Foddy. You know what? I gotta get this off my chest. Developers, please stop doing this shit. You don't need to shoehorn platforming into your game. It's not just Clair Obscur. I've seen this everywhere. Why do y'all insist on serving me spam with my steak dinner? Despite all of the obvious comparisons, if you look at the reviews, if you look at the reception this game has garnered online, I don't think many folks question that what Sandfall has created is something that can stand on its own and is a triumph in its own right. But it's clearly a work of art that respects its ancestors. And this is completely my opinion, I can't find this anywhere, But I think this philosophy of honoring those that came before is intentionally etched in the narrative of the game itself.
Come on, we always said the future of Lumiere is more important than
Any individual life, yes.
Do you still believe that?
When one falls, this is what we're fighting for.
There's a theme that is resounding in Clair Obscur, this idea of being a piece of something larger than oneself. That everything this expedition is doing is only possible because of those that came before. That what you're fighting for now is those who come after. These expeditions are a generational human effort, the cascading cry of ages of people all lending themselves to a singular goal: to end the cycle of the paintress. And the game doesn't just talk about it, it shows you. Your journey will not just be predicated by previous expeditioners, it'll be molded by them. The path forward wasn't put there by developers or conveniently yellow-painted footholds in the rock. That was Expedition 69. They installed grips in this mountainside. The grappling hook stations that you use to continue toward the paintress, that was Expedition 70. They invented these and opened the path forward for their children and grandchildren. The people who came before are not just flavor text. Their influence is felt, as without them, this endeavor would not be possible. Left behind journal entries provide wisdom for your journey. Each checkpoint you are able to rest, refill your health, improve your stats, and assign new skills at is there because of the expedition who planted that flag. There is literally a human bridge in one area where you must walk over the petrified corpses of your ancestors to continue along your way. Each expedition is simultaneously a group of living souls just like you and me, and also a single footprint on a path humanity is trailblazing to earn its right to exist. It is a beautiful sentiment that even if somehow this expedition fails, the next one will make it further because of your efforts. There is a beautiful camaraderie about it that makes you identify with these characters even more because you walk this path with them, unsure if they'll end the cycle or just be another step in this grand saga. You're constantly reminded of the sacrifices of those who've paved the way, yet no matter what happens to those who may fall around us,
We continue.
the dream that we all aspire to achieve is greater than any one of us. It is not just a catchphrase, it is the DNA of the people of Lumiere, what you agree to every time a battle concludes. What I imagine the philosophy was when this game was being developed. Without all of the titles that inspired the staff of Clair Obscur, this game likely does not exist. Just like without the effort of every previous expedition, this path to ultimate freedom does not exist. It is a movement that feels larger than oneself, a heroic charge into the fray that ignites the soul. Which makes it so enormously bizarre that this game decides to completely throw all of that away. This is your major spoiler warning.
Wanna plant it?
There's so many questions left to answer.
My family, a facsimile of yours, and this world, a mirror, painted by your mother, the paintress.
There is something inherently jarring about the complete and total dissonance between your journey before defeating the paintress and after. The narrative before this point is the story of the people of Lumiere, of Expedition 33, fighting for their freedom. The second is something else entirely. And it confirms what we already knew about the first. It's fiction. It is not real, but more specifically, it is in-universe fiction. Lumiere, the Gestrels, the continent, the wonder, the heart-swelling mission of the expeditioners is all part of a canvas painted by Verso de Sangre, and subsequently his family. As painters, they all have the power to bluskadoo into the works of art they paint. The only problem, staying too long will slowly kill you. And that is exactly what is happening to Aline de Sange, the mother, as she grieves the loss of her son Verso, who was lost in a fire. This was his painting originally, and you discover that the real reason the paintress, Aline, is so heartbroken is because being here is her only remaining connection to her son. She's painted an entire civilization complete with painted copies of her family, including her late son Verso, the one you've been traveling with this entire time. Verso is a portrait of a dead man, a painted memory brought to life. Aline's real-world husband Renoir and their daughter Clair are trying to erase the painting and eject her out of it. But it is a slow process. Each new number plastered on the monolith is not her erasing the people of Lumiere, it is her warning to them for how much longer she can hold off Renoir from erasing them. And upon discovering all of this, to me at least, it was just as interesting an answer as it was a question when I first started the game. This was a satisfying explanation for the gommage, which is excellent, because when you have a premise this grand and mysterious, the justification has to be just as profound for the story to land. I think it delivers in strides more than a ton of other JRPG and fantasy explanations, just my opinion, but an unfortunate consequence of this is that the final act of the game essentially undercuts the journey you've taken to get to this point. We've always known that this journey was fantasy to us, the player, but by making it also fantasy to the actual characters of the game, it instantly takes the only world we've known since the beginning and douses it in an inescapable truth. It doesn't matter. And this is illustrated on multiple levels. On one hand, you see it in how those that know the truth treat the people of Lumiere. Look how the real world's Renoir doesn't hesitate to gommage everyone at the end of Act 2. Look how painted Renoir doesn't even acknowledge Gustave's question when he asks,
Why? Why are you doing this?
Because he knows the Expeditioners are just Aline's creations, he doesn't even consider explaining his actions in the same way you wouldn't explain to a mistaken line in a drawing why you're erasing it. On the other hand, the narrative itself suddenly treats the non-Dissonre characters as secondary. Late in Act 2 and through all of Act 3, Lune, Ciel, and Monoko grow largely unimportant to the main story. Outside of being tools in battles, they're treated as background characters as the spotlight completely shifts to the Dissonre family's grief. Maelle's slow descent into the same coping mechanism as her mother, Renoir and Painted Verso's resolve that destroying the canvas is ultimately best for the very real people outside of it. All at once, Clair Obscur sneezes, and the next thing you know, you are presented with a completely different narrative, given a completely new motivation, and essentially told, yeah, everything you fought for in the first half, it never really mattered. That town never really existed. This moving funeral for Gustave and all of the resolve and purpose you felt in that moment was irrelevant. This has always been about the gods who created this world. And if you check the online reaction to this, some people cite this as a major flaw with the game. They love the original storyline. They hate how duplicitous Verso is for betraying the expedition. Perhaps they admit that the game is well written and that it's an interesting twist, but there was a lingering dissonance between this cast of characters we spent all this time with and the conclusion that they were only a means of telling an entirely different story. One of grief and escapism. But that jarring incongruity, like the suspended objects that riddle the canvas, remind me of another game. Shortly after Clair Obscur came out, I received a quiet influx of comments like these on a video I made last January titled, Games About Letting Go. People really regretted that I made it before Expedition 33 released because it would have fit perfectly with this video's subject matter. And I agree. In it, I talk about Final Fantasy X, Xenoblade 3, Hellblade, and Neva, games where personal heartbreak is illustrated on a grand scale, and how each game's narrative is strategically designed to cause you the same heartbreak that began the cycle you stumble upon. By making you deal with the loss of characters you learn to love in the main narrative, by exposing you firsthand to the sorrow of running out of time, these games elegantly compel you to empathize with the villains of these stories. And I think by discarding that beautiful purpose that Clair Obscur spends so much time building, it is supposed to feel like loss. You don't even really have time to mourn the gommage of all of Lumiere before you're immediately thrown into a new narrative. It intentionally feels icky when Verso replaces Gustave before you've even had a chance to process his death. Mael's nightmares, the cryptic interactions between Verso and Painted Renoir, the things Monoko doesn't say. In little ways, this reality-based plot slowly encroaches upon your fantasy one. And while it is interesting and does keep the big plot twist after the paintress from feeling completely unexpected, it still comes off as almost insulting. You don't begin this game as a Dissonre, you begin it as an expeditioner. In fact, you, the player, much like Mael, are born into this world. Like her, your knowledge of reality came after your belief that this world was the real one. Your time with this game has been almost entirely with the expedition. Lumiere becomes your family, and despite what is happening outside the canvas or the nature of the canvas's existence, it means something to you. It's only natural and it's by design that you'd value the lives of the expeditioners just as much, if not more, than the lives of the Dissonres. Like the worlds of Xenoblade 3 and Final Fantasy X and Neva, what this dissonance does is make you experience the same loss Aline, the paintress, faces. All at once, you're faced with both the loss and irrelevance of a people and a world you've grown to love.
Do you know why I cannot leave her or you behind? I cannot lose you too.
You see, that's how I feel about them. I can't lose them either.
You're told that being here, not allowing this place to resolve, may in fact allow you to stay here with them, but it also heartbreakingly means causing suffering on the other end. It's a moral dilemma that every character in the story has their own thoughts on. Does the canvas deserve to continue? Do the creations have the right to live? Should this place be allowed to rest? Would keeping it around only prolong the suffering? This is the grand conflict the game has been whispering to you about through the art style, the real tragedy that is lingering over the adventure. As you explore the canvas, you'll find broken pieces of the Dissonre manor, the wallpaper, the furniture, the decor, all cloaked in the hard lines and symmetry of Art Deco, an echo of Renoir's desire for this canvas to be erased and for everyone to return to reality. When you visit Serene, the Axon Renoir paints as a tribute to his wife, you'll find that the architecture here is the complete opposite. Flowing strokes etched into the stone are complemented with dancing tapestry and falling rose petals, an appropriate portrayal of a woman who desperately craves to escape from her grief into an enchanting dream. And yet in Lumiere, you find both styles ever conflicting, ever contrasting, suspended in an infinite stalemate. Not allowed to finally fall to the ground, forbidden from resolving, never advancing forward to heal, never being allowed to go back to when Verso was truly alive, ever in this endless now. Like the other games from this video's spiritual prequel, this world is a physical manifestation not only of the endless and festering trap that is grief, but also a painted portrait of the contrast between what each of its artists desires. And much like the chiaroscuro art style relies on harshly contrasted colors to add dramatic flair to its subject, these characters are portrayed with harshly contrasting motivations and actions to illustrate their toil with this. Painted Renoir treats Gustave and the other expeditioners as simple stains to be erased because they are painted, despite the fact that he himself is also just a painting. His philosophy around truly existing somehow only applies to his family. Aline cannot handle her grief, but selfishly she continues to indulge in her mourning despite inadvertently causing the exact same grief for the people of Lumiere every single year. Mael understands Painted Alicia's desire to cease existing because she is only a facsimile of someone she never asked to be. But hypocritically, Mael does not allow Verso the same decency and instead refuses to gommage him because she cannot deal with losing him. We've already talked about Lune and her prickly treatment of Mael despite always hating being seen that way by her parents, and Verso may be the most duplicitous of all of them. His actions in one moment portray a man who genuinely cares about his fellow expeditioners despite what he knows to be true about them, and yet these tender moments are betrayed by his ultimate goal: to force Aline from the canvas and allow Renoir to end both his and all of Lumiere's existence, making an impossible choice for everyone there.
Verso, stop! You can't just decide this for everyone!
You might see it as heroic, you might see it as cruel. Painted Renoir sees it just as indulgent as Aline's actions.
Tell me, how are you different from her in doing this?
And it's a perfectly valid question. Either solution begets suffering for one party, and Verso deeply struggles with this. You can see this in his journal entry from the very first expedition, where he has to betray a woman named Julie, a woman he was in love with, to ensure that the expedition doesn't kill the paintress and they can all continue to exist. He holds on to the belief that one day Aline will repaint her and they can all live happily.
And once we free Mama, she'll bring you back.
But at some point, perhaps when he begins to understand just how much Aline is truly languishing, or when he sees that Mael is headed down the exact same path, he is selflessly met with the resolve to end things for the good of the Dissongeres, and perhaps selfishly the ability to rest and no longer be the source of this cycle of despair. What you get in Clair Obscur is a cast of characters that all self-contradict in their motivations. Their happiness causes others agony. Their nobility imposes the same nobility unwillingly onto their loved ones. Their ideals are flexible so long as it is convenient for them. From one perspective, an action might be seen as the only right thing to do. From another, it is out of the question.
We're all hypocrites, doing the same thing to each other.
And you are no exception to this. The final decision you make in Clair Obscur is essentially answering a question, which on the surface boils down to, which matters more? The painted world you've come to love, or the Dissongeres' real-life grief and healing? And I did a ton of digging on this, but I wasn't able to find a definitive answer for which ending players tended to pick more of. There is plenty of discourse about which ending is right, but as far as what people in the moment actually picked before they knew how their decision would resolve, that is less clear. But if I had to place a bet, I'd expect that most folks picked the Mael ending. There are a few reasons for this. One, when Verso begins to hint that he is about to turn on Mael, sinister music plays, hinting that he may be the evil one here.
See things as they are, not how you want them to be.
What?
Two, when Alicia's letter is read during the final gommage, she plants the idea that since Mael is both human and born among the people of the paintings, perhaps she can find a way to save everyone.
Your family, however, believes only one can survive. But perhaps you'll find another way.
Three, Verso himself even hints at this in that journal entry from before. In so many ways, it is teased that now that Renoir and Aline have left the canvas, that Mael can make everything right, and that she will be the savior of both the painting and the family. That is the kind of character she is treated as, this almost Moses-like Kal-El type character that is born of two worlds, destined to undo the evils of the past. And when you pair that with the well-established dissonance between what you, the player, have come to love about the canvas and this secret secondary plot that is forced upon us in the final act, it's an extremely tempting and in many ways correct feeling answer to pick Mael here. Why not save the world you love? Why not believe that Mael will be different from her mother? Why not show Verso that this can, in fact, work? This is the ending I picked. And while I was conflicted from seeing both sides of this for the reasons I just stated, I still felt like I was picking the good end. But then...
Stop him from painting.
Don't say that.
Unpaint me. Unpaint me.
So...
Please. this life.
Stop saying
I
that.
don't want this life. I don't want this life.
It quickly became clear that I had fallen for the game's final trick. As much as I was filled with joy for seeing Gustav again, as much as I loved seeing everyone finally be happy and free of the cycle of suffering, when I saw Verso, this hollowed out echo of a man being endlessly replayed like a frayed record, I realized that I too was a hypocrite. I picked this. I got what I wanted, but the suffering wasn't over. It had just changed forms. This is how Clair Obscur exposes you. It presents a cycle that needs to be broken. It makes you care about the people in need of saving. You empathize with them. You feel a kinship with them. It then rips them from you. Not just in a typical killing them off fashion, but from a very personal, much more far-reaching, they never mattered fashion. It gives you a small taste of the very same pain Aline faced, and then watches you fold and make the exact same mistake that she does. And here you are, silently watching the credits, realizing that you have just created another Paintress. It's deeply disturbing sitting with what you've done if you pick this ending. And if you pick Verso's, yes, you've arguably taken the better route. But even this way damns Maëlle to a life she does not want. Even this way, you have to face those characters you spent so much time with and watch them give you expressions that speak volumes more than any dialogue can. You become just as duplicitous and conniving as Verso if you go this way. And again, perhaps it is a mercy, perhaps it is heroic in a manner of speaking, but I think it's important that the game makes you pick a side.
Life keeps forcing cruel choices.
There is currently talk of Clair Obscur getting a movie, and while I'd certainly watch, I do think this is one aspect of the story that is best communicated as a video game. By forcing you to make the choice yourself, Expedition 33 paints its point on a deeply personal level. There simply is no easy way when it comes to loss. We know this to be true from our own lives. You can try to escape it. You can push it down, stay home, shut out those who love you while you stay curled up in a little ball. But this will leave you endlessly suspended in a fantasy that only causes anguish for those around you and leaves you unable to move forward. Or you can embrace reality, despite how continually agonizing it may be to face a world that doesn't have that person in it. This game, like the others from before, does not patronize you with a happily ever after. It makes it painfully clear that facing the grief head on, though absolutely hellish, is the only way to truly heal. And it's for these reasons that despite how polarizing Verso is, many find him to be tragically inspiring. He knows that his actions will ultimately cost him ever seeing Julie again. He knows that he is using Expedition 33 and continually marches them to their doom. He knows what removing Aline from the painting and sending Maëlle home will do, and yet, despite this, he is kind to the expedition. The moments he shares with them are still genuine, helping Ciel find peace from the losses she has suffered, listening to Lune process her past, being a dear friend to Monoko. He even consoles Maëlle on her way out because he genuinely loves his sister.
You're okay.
It's how Aline painted him.
You're okay.
It's ironic that this painted version of Verso that Aline created is so accurate that he would prioritize the real-world Dissonances over the painted ones. It's beautiful that the painted memory of her son would ultimately be the force that saves her. Let that wash over you. What would that person you lost want you to do? Will you let their memory be the reason you fall to despair? Or will you allow it to help you move forward? Will you honor the one who came before? Tomorrow comes. We continue. Hey gang, thank you so very much for watching. If you're French watching this, I would like to personally apologize to you for butchering your language. These names were a little tough for me. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I enjoyed writing it. One thing I really love about this job is how much more deeply you understand a piece of media after you research it and write about it in this level of detail, and Expedition 33 is one for the ages. It was a pleasure to make this, and congrats to Sandfall for a hell of an achievement. If you like this video, give it a like, hit that subscribe button, let me know your thoughts on this game down below, and if you just adore this show, then consider giving my Patreon page a look. For $1 a month, you can get weekly updates, bonus content like bloopers and editing live streams, creative input. You might even get featured at the end of a video like these folks. Wesley B. Honeyford, Eric Lindpainter, Gritty, Ramblepack 64, Kuro Tom 24, Asa Dakai, Ryan Unger, and Melanie Malone. Thank you, Melon. Thank you again for watching. Take care and have yourself a damn good one. Bonus theory time. Okay, so the painters were feeding with the writers, right? Cool. I wonder if there are any other video games where artistic works come to life and where a writer creates things by simply putting pen to paper. Oh shit, could you imagine?